You alluded to cooperation, a cohabitation environment between hybrid cloud, private cloud. We talked about the hyperscalers. What do you think we need to be betting on to make it very practical? You start.
Yeah, okay. Well, so I'll tell you 3 things that I think don't work.
Okay.
And then I'll talk about 1 thing I think is promising, right? So what I think doesn't work from a perspective of protecting European data from US government access is just locating data within Europe. Right? Storing data locally can have performance benefits. When we talked about, Manuel talked about low latency applications, yes, performance benefits, sure. But we're not protecting our data from foreign government access by storing it locally.
Okay.
Second thing that I don't think works is simply having a European subsidiary of a US hyperscaler. Even with a European board of directors and some level of independence, that's not going to protect your data from US government access. There's 2 concerns there. One would be if the US parent company can simply remotely access the data stored in Europe, they'll just bypass that organizational measure, right? And the second would be if they can order that subsidiary to hand over the data, then they will simply do so. Right? So I don't think that works. Third thing that I don't think works, if you'll permit me, contractual commitments. Right? It's perfectly fine for Microsoft or AWS to say, oh, where we can, we'll fight orders before the US courts. Right? And a lot of work is being done by that sentence, where we can. Right? And there will be situations in which you can object to a US production order. For instance, law enforcement orders, you can object based on comity. Right? But when we're talking about intelligence agencies under FISA Section 702, it is not at all clear to me how US cloud providers can object to those kinds of orders. 3 things that don't work. 1 that does.
What works?
So I do have a lot of faith in these encryption technologies, right? I do think that if we're talking about client-side encryption, or if we're talking about new confidential computing techniques, then those can allow for the use of US infrastructure while protecting the confidentiality of European customer data.